Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Awakening Your Inner Genius. We are on lesson number 30, and we've got Margaret Rue here with us, Jim Porter, and Karen Elkins, and Kimberly Faith will be joining us shortly, and I am Ken Pearson. And I want to thank everybody for coming here, and we're going to take a few moments. You can see what's coming up on the horizon here in terms of the lessons that we'll be looking at in January, the rest of January. So we're going to do 30 tonight, and then we'll do 31 and 28, I guess, and not on the 26th. I'm sure it's going to be the week after, but we are on point. I want to welcome everyone tonight and thank everyone. Karen, can you keep an eye on any kind of chat in the chat box and keep us looped in there? And there's a question or something you want to keep us in that. And let's take a minute to just quiet down. And if James, you can put up our ocean scene so we can get a little quiet moment. And this is, when you get that quiet moment, it's about trying to decentrate as opposed to concentrate. So concentrate is to wind up, decentrate is to unwind. So to me, it's almost like daydreaming. It would be to decentrate. And when you're in a daydream state, your mind is almost full. So let's take a look at the ocean, James, if you can pull that up. And all you do is, for me, is to get quiet for a minute, settle down. I like to close my eyes. That's just me. You don't have to. This is a constant communion in life anyway. These moments when we meditate are isolated moments for the purpose of getting to stillness. So, we're about ready to do a show. I'm wound up for the show. So that makes me want to unwind for a moment to just get back to center and get back to God. And so we're going to decentrate. And this isn't a thinking process. It's a desiring process for me. And in one of the communions that Walter has in the Divine Iliad, talks about the glory of thy anointing light descends upon me. My soul awakens as that light is all around me. Thy light shines through me. Thy light encompasses me. I am dissolved in thy light. My light and thy light have become one. I am immersed in thy light. I'm in thy light, knowing my light, and here I say, be thou with me, so that I would never be alone again. And then I want to quiet down by desire, just desire to listen to that ocean and become one with the sounds. And if you're looking at it, the motion and the colors and all the vibrancy, just settle yourself into it. It speaks to you. We talked about that in the last lesson, the forms of communication. Here you've got colors, you've got motion, you've got waves. They all represent the piston pumps of the universe. So lose yourself. And so to me, it's desire. So we're going to take 30 seconds just to desire stillness. Okay, come on back. And for me, that moment is just where I get that moment where there's no thoughts. There's nothing there. I'm just in a moment of stillness. And that's where I truly do connect to the mind universe, which we're going to talk about, the difference between the mind universe and the physical universe in this lesson 30 tonight. It's quite a long lesson, but we'll get into it. James, do you want to pull up that first page for us? And we'll have let's go ahead and have Margaret read that first paragraph for us. That's highlighted on 585, please.
Okay. Confusion of ideas regarding the spiritual and physical aspects of man. Before closing this series of lessons on the clarification of the relations between the light of the undivided cosmic universe of mind knowing and the divided sensed universe of mind thinking, it is well to summarize and review the preparations for better understanding which the earlier lessons have covered.
Go ahead and keep going, Margaret.
There have been so many teachings based upon blind reasoning, so many theories based upon misunderstood mental and physical experiences, and so many misconceptions of God and mind based upon sensing, that it is well to vividly define these relations from a scientific basis so that all guessing will be entirely eliminated from future comprehension.
Okay, and now Margaret, just read that underlined part, and then I'm going to ask you to share on that. What does that mean? What's the application? Go ahead and read that.
Okay. The confusion of ideas and theories has arisen because of the impossibility of penetrating the veil of the invisible universe of mind knowing through the senses of the body.
Stop there, Margaret. Can you tell us what that means? What is that? What is it that we're being taught here? What is the application of that for our lives?
Yeah, I think what they're trying to say to us is that we're so overwhelmed by our bodily senses that we're guided the wrong way. In other words, when people are not still, they're jumping from one idea to another or one action to another. It's when you actually have a flash of inspiration that actually is coming right out of the stillness. That's why it's instantaneous. But we're rarely still in our workaday life. We're rarely still, and so we keep jumping from this, that, the other, and we're confusing it for. Sometimes we confuse it for productivity. It's really just a lot of action of sensed clay. So the Russels would like us to quiet down so that those flashes can appear.
Okay, Kara, what do you got?
I think I like the idea of the flashes appearing, but also all of our senses are electric, which we're talking about in this thing. And your eyes, your ears, it's interesting that it all is electric. So we're getting waves of information that are coming, and we think that when we get that sensation, that must be the truth. Part of that is the replay that we play in our brain, which is like a computer. It's a sensation, action, reaction. It's not say that you're thinking, you're just reacting to something. It's not necessarily, it may trigger you to have an alarm, but it's not necessarily a knowledge of something that's correct. So just want to start it off that way, because sensing and knowing and what you think you know versus what is true is not always just what you're sensing.
Jim, what do you got?
I agree with Karen. What we do is we go through and Margaret, we go through most of our day, most of our life, reacting to sensed things. And it's hard not to, because it's constant. It is an amazing constant. And if you do not deliberately take the time to walk out of that action and that activity and meditate several times throughout the day, you do get lost in it.
Okay, and now for me, I think that what they're trying to help me to, what was that?
I was just going to say, I wanted to jump in. Sorry, I'm late. I did finally get connected.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Hi. Nice to
I
see
know.
you.
I know. Sorry about that. But I did want to mention something too that I thought was really important as we were reading through this, is that this difference, this understanding of knowing and sensing, I think is especially important in light of what's happening in the world today, because people can get really lost in only believing what it is that they see with their eyes and hear with their ears, instead of having a deep knowing that there is something beautiful happening with humanity.
Okay, so to me, what it's trying to teach me is trying to help me to understand that we live in a world where science, academics have always been trying to find things through the senses. And they're helping me to understand that I'm never going to gain knowledge that way. The only thing that the senses do is feel effect. Let's go to 587, James, and read the 1, 2, third paragraph down. Karen, why don't you read that, since you were talking from it earlier?
Good. Was it give thought to the fact? Is that where I'm starting?
No, we say that we have 5 senses.
Okay. We say we have 5 senses that
was what you were referring to earlier, right? Yep.
Smelling, hearing, feeling. And all of these one. We feel different with our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body, but they are just one sense of feeling. It's like that electric wave coming in, actually activating different things, but they're still coming from the same thing. And that is all that the universe, physical universe, is composed of. Just
okay. Hold on, Karen, because we wanted to go to the next paragraph. But let's go ahead and read that. Just that yellow line. Then go ahead. You can share on that.
Okay. And you did. I'm not sense waving, sense bodies, motions, feel. Okay. Moreover, no sense body in the universe could even move if not told to do so by intelligence, which is centered it, which centers it. That's an interesting thought.
Okay.
Well, I really love the way it then went on to talk about even universal intelligence, because it said just like your car cannot move without the desire extended to it by centering intelligence, so likewise your body and all other bodies move only because of the desire of the universal intelligence. And I wanted to encourage everybody to write down that phrase, universal intelligence. I love the way the Russells capitalized both of them. Ken, that was very touching to me and very powerful to think about the universal intelligence.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Margaret, what do you got on that?
Well, you know what's
There's been
mysterious
one
about,
thing missed. I'll tell you that right now. One thing's been missed about this whole thing. So what do you got?
well, you know, what's mysterious about it is you always think of intelligence as active thinking, but actually universal intelligence is unchanging and still.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Wow.
you know, all idea it is actually, it does initiate from the stillness, but it's a little mysterious to call it universal intelligence when we know it's unchanging and still. So,
So it's kind of like we're all ideas. What they're helping me to understand here is they're telling me what I haven't heard here, which we all should talk about, is you're in that paragraph we just read that had Karen read. It says we all of these are one. All these senses that we call the six senses are all one. And as Karen was saying, all it does is detect motion. And a lot of us are living, believing we're thinking and we're acting and doing things from our knowing creative self when we're just sensing. And that's where the confusion comes in. Like taste is motion. It's not like some different chemicals. The eyes detect motion. The ears detect motion. It's all about sensed motion. It's all about vibrations, right? As Karen said, it's all electrical. So that we confuse that, and that's the life we live in, and that's the freedom, is to realize my body's not who I am, but if I keep living through the senses and believe that I'm living in a spiritual life, I'm deceiving myself, because in the spiritual world, it is undivided. And in that world, there is, like Margaret was talking about, there exists concept, all idea. Concept is in one place. It's not divided. What you can do is borrow a piece of it. So let's say I desire to make a painting. Well, I first have to have a concept of what do I want to paint? Nature? Do I want to paint a human being? Do I want to paint a building? What do I want to paint? And then then I would go into decentration mode and think about, I want to paint a building. Like Kimberly's daughter, Heather, is an amazing painter and paints wonderful architectural structures. So if I was going to paint a building, I would be going to stillness to like try and envision how's that building going to be? Is it a bridge? What is it I'm going to specifically see in the architect? And that concept will lie in all idea. It's sitting there in a pool that's undividable. But the idea is there. The image of what I'm looking for is in that pool. Sometimes it'll wake you up while you're sleeping. That's a concept and an inspiration. You got to write it down, take a look at it, because the universe is speaking to you. And that's what we're trying to help me understand, is the universe will speak to me, but it doesn't speak through the senses. It speaks to me through undivided concepts. That means whole ideas. So that's the biggest thing, is like, if you want to create something, you need to envision the whole idea before you can create it. And what we're going to learn in some of these lessons is you don't even start working on an idea until you fully see it. Yes, Kimberly.
So what I found so interesting, this is my third time through the home study course. And as we've been saying for a while, that layers reveal themselves, layers and layers and layers. And what I found, I'd heard Ken say, he's a 30-year student. I'd heard Ken say that all senses were one. And yet I had missed that point, that nuance, Jim. I had missed that when I've been studying it before. I had not put that together as a new student, that all senses are one. And when I heard Ken say that, that's why I wanted to mention to everybody who's been joining us every Sunday night, that's the beauty of what this home study course does, is it keeps revealing itself to you. And Jim, I found that to be incredibly powerful, understanding that all senses are one. Jim?
Karen.
Yes,
it's Jim. Go ahead. Then we'll go to Karen.
It's an awakening, and with that comes the understanding that you truly are not embodiment. You're not. But bodies have purpose, and their purpose is to manifest divinity. And that is the journey to awakening. And that's exactly what we're doing here today. On the journey to awakening to the understanding that we are not the vehicle we run around in. We change them as quickly as we change cars throughout our life. But the purpose of being in these vehicles is to experience.
Hey,
healing.
Jim, do me a
Yeah.
favor. Read 587, that last paragraph there, because that references exactly what you're talking about. Last paragraph on
Okay.
587, James. There you go, Jim. Go ahead and read that. You can read from the yellow on. We've already read the yellow part.
Okay. Moreover, no sense body in the universe could ever move if not told to do so by the intelligence which centers it. Just as, do you want me to stop there or go on?
No, let's read what you were going to talk about. Go ahead.
Just as your car cannot move without desire extended to it by its centering intelligence, so likewise your body and all other bodies move only because of the desire of the universal intelligence centering them, and not otherwise. Did
Stop
you catch
there.
that?
Can you
Wait,
explain
hang
that a
on a
little bit?
second. One second. Kim, I love that you circled universal intelligence, because that's the key to this whole paragraph. You are not a body, you are universal intelligence expressing through a body.
Okay. So, Margaret, would you like to show up? Karen, go ahead. There you go.
Karen,
I just want to punctuate a point on here. If everything is coming from a prism of the white light, we're all coming from the white light. What distinguishes how you understand the light in its coming? You have to remember, as it's cascading in its colors and it spins, the spin creates the chemistry, its geometry, its actual picture that actually gets pixelized onto the stage of what you're doing. So if you can understand that this light, as it beams, is turning and spinning, creating geometry, creating its chemistry, creating the you that's you. So that's how when Jim says you're not, you are that body that's being projected like on the screen. You are what, if you go liquid, solids, and gases, you're that solid crystalline structure that's coming in, which will dissolve and melt and go back like vapor back to and refold. But it is still the one light doing many different aspects, which you're able to have with all of your senses. And so what's driving it still has to be that one beam of light, that one centered point. So when we understand that, that's also where all the information is. So when we get still, we can do it. If we're just always being busy, like Margaret says, we're not stepping into the quiet place where we can actually grasp the images and the knowledges that are sitting there in the infinite.
Actually, it's telling us that we are doing it. And that's the point. But what it's helping us to see is that we can do it at deeper levels. We don't have to do it. We can't move our pinky, right? I can't move this finger without universal cooperation of universal intelligence helping me to move the finger. When I move my hand, the butterfly effect, right? It creates a wind across the universe. So the bottom line is universal intelligence is centering all of us. But if you're not aware of it, then you're not working with it. And that's what this home study course is all about. It's about learning to work in the undivided world and bring it to the divided world. And that has to do with concepts. So it's going to be about producing things in your life. And then producing things in your life comes from concept, right? And that's what we read last week about instinct, imagination, and inspiration, right? Our inspiration, imagination. And we already have risen above instinct, at least what we're talking about is some of the population has, and the ones that are studying this course and are students of this course are in fact rising above those instincts. And so what's left is inspiration and imagination. Inspiration is the concept. Imagination is the tool at which I put the concept together to bring it into a seemingly physical form. But remember, even when we bring it out of the ideal world, the picture that the painter creates never leaves the painter's mind. It's only, remember, that's a rendition on that canvas of what's in the painter's mind, but it's not what's in the painter's mind. It's an extension of what's in the painter's mind, a representation of what the painter sees, a representation of what the musician is hearing. It's all a representation, an effect, a mirror, if you will. And so the bottom line is they're helping me to understand, to work with the difference between the undivided and divided, and that I'm going to live in two worlds, that we exist in both these worlds. And this is how we can function in these worlds, sort of like piston strokes, divided, undivided, rather than just living in the divided world of effect. And we're never going to find cause and effect. There's no energy in matter, because remember, all matter is just an extension of an idea. It's never the idea itself. The idea never leaves that pool of concept. God, the undivided realm of God, that idea is always existing there. So what we do is we get a glimpse of an image by desire. We must desire to collect that image, whatever it might be. I play the piano. So that as I play it, I desire to hear the music of the spheres. Yes, Kimberly, you had your hand up?
Well, I was just saying that what you're talking about, working with the divided universe, imagine what a shift it is in our thinking to be able to do that. Because I love the comment that's at the end of the first paragraph on page 588, the one that I had highlighted, and it says the entire universe is but one intercommunicating mind-controlled.
Hold on, let's get there. Let's get there on the screen.
All
okay,
right.
there you go.
The entire universe is but one intercommunicating, ing, meaning it's ongoing, mind-controlled sensed body. So that's thinking about the universe as a body, each atom of it being centered by the universal intelligence, which created it and is controlling it. To me, that's exactly what you were talking about, is this, and to me, that's really very holographic when we think about at the largest. It was mind-blowing to me to read this, to think about this, and the largest of principles, and even in the smallest of principles with our
this is like your little picture, the photograph you love, where there's a flux connecting every human being, all connected by light. You know that favorite? What's that favorite picture of yours? If you want to bring that up, because that
the God is light.
That. So
God is light
picture, James. Can you find that? And in the meantime, when we're talking about that, that's let's remember where we're going with this, and remember what they're trying to help me to understand is how I can exist in both worlds. So this is really where the rubber hits the road. This lesson is a long lesson, has a lot of depth to it, and it's going to help me to understand the things that are blocking me and the things that are going to relieve me, and also how to not live and confuse or be confused anymore. There you go, Kimberly.
Yeah, that one is my favorite. And I know, Margaret, you had a comment, but as I've mentioned several times before, it was this illustration of Walter Russell's that literally stopped me in my tracks, and I knew that he had seen something incredibly powerful. Margaret?
Yeah, I was going to say that, the Russells always mention the divine trinity, which is the stillness or the fulcrum, and then the two levers. But what's interesting is the fulcrum is largely invisible. Now, when you see a whirlpool in the bathtub, you can see the fulcrum, and you can see the levers are bounded, okay? But the fulcrum is actually the centering intelligence. In other words, you can't have motion unless you have the fulcrum. Otherwise, nothing is actually guiding it or controlling it. So it takes three. It takes the stillness in the middle, and then it takes the two levers on either side, which is generally toward integration and then away from integration or disintegration. But it's happening simultaneously, and that's why there's boundaries.
Yep.
So it's the three.
It's a tornado. If you can actually visualize it that way. In the center of a tornado is what they call the eye of the storm, which is that still point.
But then another way to look at it, because the Russells mentioned this in the course, is that if you feel cold, right, you're out of balance. So you're being communicated to put a coat on. When you're not out of balance, right, you don't need that coat. In other words, you're at equilibrium. So equilibrium is really another statement for fulcrum. When we're walking, we're continually out of balance, regaining balance.
So the body is what Margaret's helping me to understand there. What we're talking about there is the body isn't aware of itself until it's out of balance. If a body's in a balanced state, it has no awareness. And what we've
Oh,
talked
wow.
about before is residue effect, right? That we have this, if we do anything out of balance, there's always a residue effect of negativity or positivity. If it's in balance, it's in a positive motion. If it's in a negative state, then it's going to leave a negative residue, whatever that residue. So when you do something kind, it leaves a kind residue in that motion. When you have kind thoughts about other people without saying a word, there's a positive residue that's affected, that's gone on from there because it came from your heart through stillness, like Margaret just said, and then back to them because we're all connected. And what we just heard is we're all a bunch of atoms, and every atom is oscillating, talking to every other atom. And when one atom moves, we all move. It's sort of like, think of a bunch of balloons stuffed in this room that's behind me there, right? They all get packed in there. Pretty soon they're no longer going to be round. They're going to be the squareness of that room. And therefore, if you touch one balloon, every balloon will feel that effect of that's going on there. So yes, did you have your hand up there, Kimberly?
So I thought, I don't want to blow past something really important that you just said that I had never really landed. And you said we're not really aware of our bodies until we are imbalanced, because balance is that natural state. So interesting that you say that, because I've always thought as imbalance is not good. Okay. In my 3D divided mind, I would tend to think of that as not good. But when I heard you just say that, there was an aha, and I'm curious if people can comment in the chat box, that actually imbalance is a gift to us to further experience the expression. I see Jim nodding.
But also, it is the whole drama of creation. In other words, we're always going in, out of balance, in balance, out of balance, in balance, and it's an oscillation, and it is rhythmic. And we're doing that
Ideally.
all day long, but it's the invisible fulcrum that's actually guiding and controlling it from within and from without all
Yep.
day long. That's why Leo Russell would say you want to work meditatively throughout the day with God. In other words, God is always there.
Yep.
Right. You're
Must be. That's what that mindfulness. They use the term mindfulness now, which is another way of saying being present with God in the moment you're in. And that's something very important that I've learned along the road. And this is why we're all we have is today. All we really have is the moment we're in. I can't be with God 5 minutes ago, and I can't be with God 5 minutes from now, but I can be with God right now. If the desire force is there, right? If I desire that oneness, that connection, that's where it helps me to come to balance and restore back to balance. And let me know when I'm out of balance is when I feel like a scratch in a record, an aggressive thought, an aggressive emotion for me, or being put off or put away or putting something down. I know I'm out of balance. It's not the situation, because everything's always in balance, which that was a beautiful way of relaying it, Margaret. Jim, you got anything you want to add to that?
Sounds great to me.
All right, let's move on to the next paragraph. James, you want to bring it up? It's going to be on 589. Is there anything on 589? Kimberly? 'Cause I'm ready to go to 592 if you guys want to go there.
Who's
I'm
got
going to
something?
go to 592, second paragraph there, and start there. I think that's a good place to talk. It's talking about kind of the state of where we're at right now. Remember, this was written in 1951. I'm sorry, who was talking there?
Kimberly.
Well, I wanted to jump back to something. I know you're skipping over something here, but I wanted to jump back to 590 if you don't mind, because
No?
there was something, I want to go where it says the word harp, and scroll down just a little bit, because it says the silent harp string has in it the soul of idea.
Mm-hmm.
So I have had this thing about having a harp someday at the museum, because I have this and some of Russell's posters talk about the harp string, but the vibrating harp string gives that idea a body. So any of us that have seen a string, okay, I just found that sentence of the silent harp string has in it the soul of an idea. I found that to be incredibly poetic. I didn't want to.
Yeah, Margaret was talking about exactly what you're talking about when she was talking about a body. We go through both stages. If you think of plucking a harp string, it's actually like a little machine gun, but it sounds like a tone to us. But if you slowed it down, it would be like a Gatling gun. If you think of the harp string, it's going back and forth. So here's the fulcrum, it's the center. Left would be tone, right would be tone, the center would be the fulcrum, which is stillness and silence. So it's all that music, that tone that we think we're hearing is coming from stillness to motion, to left tone, to stillness, to right tone, back to stillness, to left tone. And that's, a harp string represents every one of those plucks is the creation of a body. You made a body of sound. And each one of those bodies, if you look at the center of that harp string, it's actually hot right on the center, because that fulcrum is resisting that motion, just like we talked about the rubber band, that you can borrow as much as you want, but that rubber band is always pulling back. Whatever you borrow from concept or idea, it shall return to whence it came. You can't keep it or just hold on to it. Ideas available for everybody. Who had their hand up there?
I did. I remember doing a magazine one time, and I remember it was an artist who basically said all of your tendons in your body are like the strings. And so as we actually are in symphony with what we call the universal music, the song, the what is it, the something of the spheres, the music of the spheres.
The music of the spheres.
Our bodies are literally like dancing with it, and all the tendons in our bodies are like that harp, that we're actually dancing in tune to it. It's a pretty picture.
You know, that's a beautiful illustration of balance. What Karen's talking about now is that living in a world where I'm no longer resisting, there's a rhythm to everything. If you walk in a room and two people are talking, there's a rhythm to that conversation. If it's a room full of people, there's a rhythm to that room. A lot of people that are kind of out of balance will come in and disrupt rhythm. Someone will be having a quiet conversation and they'll make it about themselves, and that's disrupting the rhythm. What Karen's talking about now is realizing there's a continuous flow of music, a rhythm around us that we can align ourselves, and that's called the music of the spheres. And it's always there to center us, and it's the silence of nature. When you hear the wind blowing through the pine trees, that is the music of the spheres. When an atom is born, it makes an explosion. That's the music of the spheres. Kimberly, did you have your hand up?
I do have a comment, and I know Jim may want to weigh in as well before we go to break, but I wanted to share something very interesting that happened. So when I first started doing the Russell experiences, these were 3-day programs that I offered to conduct for the University of Science and Philosophy, and I brought people in, and I invited a number of different people that were influencers on TikTok. I had something very interesting happen about this subject of people being like a harp string. We had a real harpist. So one of the volunteers, Andrew, we had a real harpist that was actually in the museum, and he was in one room playing the harp. For everyone in here has been to the Russell experience. He was playing the harp because I was working to create an environment where people could find that still point. Well, this particular program, I had 3 different participants that actually said that they were ones that did light language. Now, we can debate all day whether this is real or not, but if you've seen anybody do this out there, they tend to move their fingers. They actually look like they're plucking the light. I had a healthy dose of skepticism as I was watching all this on play and just saying, okay, this is interesting. But here's what made a believer out of me is I saw a woman in one part of the museum literally doing this light language on someone to attune them. Her finger motions were mimicking the exact same finger motions that I saw Andrew doing on the harp. And it was startling to me because I was like, oh my goodness, is it possible that we're each like a harp string in the grand symphony of creation? And Jim, I found that to be quite powerful.
Yes, all sound and all music is either leading you toward harmony or away from it. And it's learning to discern between what is to the benefit of you by leading you toward harmony. Because it's much easier to remain calm and focused in your day if you're not allowing the invasive things outside of you to distract you from your inner harmony. And the way you do that, and the Russells make it very clear early in the course, if you find yourself in a state of disharmony and that disharmony is coming from without you, remove yourself from that situation if you can. If you cannot, then learn to send out love in reverse, and that will clear the room.
Yeah, you know, we need to live in a world where the world doesn't have to change for us anymore. We can change ourselves to meet the world. And we're going to read about that when we come back from break about the state. Exactly. We're going to read from 1951, the status of the world and the conditions and how much Leah was projecting and Walter were projecting exactly what we're going through now. So we're going to take a break here for the next 35 minutes. How many? 3 minutes. Oh, 3 minutes. 35 minutes. I'll be back. We're going to go eat a sandwich. All right, 3 minutes. We'll see you back here in 3 minutes.
As we're waiting for you all to return, I did want to ask James, if you would, as I know we're waiting for the team. I wanted to ask James to bring up slides 22 through 24, because this is, I just want to refer back to the illustrations that Walter Russell did. These are on display at the Russell Museum in Waynesboro, Virginia. But when you take a look at these images, there is, that's where I said it stopped me in my tracks when I said on the bottom left, the opening and closing of spirals is the heartbeat of the universe. But the title at the top, it says, can you zoom? I'm not sure if you can zoom in on that. It actually refers to the harpstrings of the universe. The next two illustrations, also, it was Walter Russell, The Unwinding of the Cosmic Clock String. spring. And then the next one, I just wanted to bring this up to everybody because you will see that he was trying to illustrate what we're all talking about here. And Margaret, I just found his attempt to capture all this quite profound in a day that there was no Photoshop, that there was no way to do motion. I mean, this is incredible.
Yeah, Walter Russell got all this knowledge during his illumination, and so he must have had all these visuals when he was in the light, and so that's why he's able to communicate it so beautifully.
Look at that cube sphere he's representing there. Isn't that amazing? God,
Guys,
I mean, I wanted to just
I'm sorry. Just let me remind you all, I've said it before, I just don't want it to slip people's minds. The majority of these ones you see in black and white, if you'll look closely, they're hand drawn in class by him on a chalkboard. Look how profound it is.
that goes back to those retreats and those USBs we have of those lectures from 50 to 54.
Well, it shows you the balance and genius within this artist. Freehanding
Yes,
this
it does.
in front of a group of people in a room and coming up with that quality is astounding.
I heard that when he was sculpting, he would do the sculpting classes, and at the end there, in like about his 90th year, he was able to sculpt in such a short period of time a beautiful image of an impression of somebody, and just so fast, and was able to do it with just no hesitation. And he used to quote that artist that, about how to create a beautiful statue, and it's easy. You just knock off the marble that doesn't need to be there, and what you have left is a beautiful image, that piece of art that you're looking at. Yes,
well, and part of why I wanted to bring these illustrations up again is because when you go through the home study course, it's one thing. To see these illustrations, it's another. And may we just not forget the gift that the Russells have given the world by capturing all of this. I mean, so for me, as just someone who just walked in there 3 years ago, that's part of what absolutely seized my heart, was that these were just so profound. And it's my genuine hope, and I invite you all to have that vision with me, that we will actually be able to keep spreading this word all over the world, because I truly believe that deep down, many of us are awakening to the fact that we've known this on a cosmic level and we've simply forgotten. Margaret, that's really been what my passion was, even from the day that I walked in there and came back to do the Russell experiences, is simply wanting people to experience what people like you and Jim have been able to have your whole life.
Well, I loved all the props you introduced, because it really communicated the science part of it as well. And I think those images, when people look at those images, they intuitively know that it's right. They just know that it's right.
One of the things we're going to get into here as we keep moving forward is we're getting into the separation of classifications of what this lesson's about, which is helping us to understand that if you are a student and you are attempting to wrap your head around this knowledge and bring it into your life, that you're in a rare group. This is a rare group. It doesn't make anybody better than, but what it does mean that you're on the ascension level. You are ascending to a higher vibration, to the undivided. Not a lot of people are going to go here. If this conversation were opened up to 95% of the population, they drop out in 5 minutes, because there'd just be a bunch of hogwash to them. It starts to make sense as you start to realize this over time, but it's important, I think, and this is what they're going to illustrate here, is the classification of people. And we're falling into two classes. That's on page 582, 592, the second paragraph there, James.
I wanted to mention, can I bring up something you want to go into that we want to point out to you, this paragraph, correct?
Yes.
Okay, but I want to mention something. So scroll down to the blue circle, James. So I'll read that paragraph for Ken. But I do want to have you all just jot this in the chat box right quick. Where the blue circle is, it says, "You are the light of the world."
Well, why don't you just go to the end and work your way back to the beginning? Read the paragraph, all right? That's what it's telling you. Why are we the light of the world?
All right, so it's our desire to close this unit of lessons by climaxing all that has gone before with some ideas for you to give deep thought for the unfoldment of your own higher powers. So I invite everybody to drink this in. We are mindful of the fact that the reason that you are studying these lessons is because you are very far ahead of the masses of mankind. You are ready for them. You have had sufficient cosmic awakening to have generated within your spiritual self an intense desire for the light of all knowing, which will transform you from the human animal stage of unfolding man, whose body senses have been preponderant and dominating his life, to the divine cosmic being. Notice that cosmic being is capitalized, whose soul will, also capitalized, will be the absolute master of your body sensing. Your awakening to the light of love will awaken your brother to the light. You are the light of the world. Woo,
What's
gives
the
me
rest of
chills.
that, huh? We're going to finish that paragraph, Karen. We'll talk in 1 second. Can you finish that paragraph there, love, and then
You
get the
are the
next one?
savior of man from himself. And it
Okay,
says we
keep
want to
reading.
point out to you the fact that the whole human race has become divided into two groups. A reticent few of the many whose ascension is towards the light. So let's pause for a moment there, because they're talking about ascension back in the 1950s, before this became mainstream. And the decadent millions whose ascension is towards the dark. Can I do that last paragraph, Ken?
Yes, that would be good.
The
Keep
world is
going, and I can
undergoing
go ahead.
the world is undergoing the agonies of a cataclysmic rebirth from body sensing to mind knowing. You who are becoming aware of your soul will become the seed for saving the human race from its deep plunge into the darkest of all its dark ages since the dawn of consciousness to man.
Hold on there, because now as you're listening to this, you realize the story's being told, guys. And if you're on here learning this as a student, you must realize you're doing something very important. You hear this word ascension, and here you are. This was written in 1951, and look at the role you're in. You've jockeyed for this position. We all have, through millions of lives, to arrive at this point where we are the light of the world and we're living free from body sensing. We're still living in the world of duality, but we're also balancing it in the world of the undivided. Go ahead and finish that up there, love, would you?
Civilization has been self-destroyed many times during the past 6,000 years and is again being self-destroyed, and all for the same reasons. Selfishness of bodies and desires of bodies for the sensations of bodies.
You scroll down,
Civilization
James.
Civilization can be
Thank you.
reborn only through love. Now notice this last sentence is in all caps, like this is the biggest they could yell it out loud, right, Jim? This is civilization can be reborn only through love of mind expressed in brotherhood of eternal man within bodies.
Okay, so tell us what that means, love.
Jim, chime in. I have lots I could say
Jim,
about
you got
that.
something you want to feed on
I,
that?
yeah, I do have input on that.
Okay.
Everyone who reads and is inspired by these lessons should begin to see themselves as literally an atlas lifting the world. Your thoughts and your holding to principles and love given out to humanity is literally lifting all of humanity. So the work that you're doing is way beyond what you may think. And when you're feeling disappointed about this, that, or the other thing due to loss or misfortune, hang on and continue to send your light and love out to the world, because that literally makes you a lifter of the world.
Well, and Jim, I want to chime into that because I want to express to everybody, you've heard me have so much gratitude for members that were on this Awaken team. We've invested a lot of money and time and energy over this past year. And in fact, I have people, some of you were so gracious, you'll email me and ask me where you can send donations. And we certainly put that up there to help support what it is that we do. Part of why we're trying so hard to help the University of Science and Philosophy and have more home study courses out there in the world is so that this word continues to spread. So for anyone listening live, or whether you're listening to this in the future, remember what it is that's being said here, because too many times we've been made to feel small in this universe, and the power of this work is to lift us up.
Jim just said it. One kind thought elevates the whole world, right? If you do one good thing for somebody, it doesn't have to be necessarily a physical gesture. It certainly can be. But it's kind of just think, I hope you're happy. I hope you receive all the things you want. When someone says, oh, I'm so excited I got a new job, to not knock it down or think little of it, but to be excited for them without having to be envious or dismissive. Karen, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I would love it if you don't mind. If James doesn't mind putting back those slides up for a minute, I want to point something out that I think people are not. When you look at exactly that, I just need that last one, that one. You have to understand you're looking from the top down. You're looking straight in, and so when you look, and that is exactly how your eye works. It's a lens that pulls light in and projects it out. It's the same way in that same coil, the way you receive information in your ears. Again, it's that golden ratio. And if you look to the cone where it's coming together and going out, that's the vortex of where particles come in of light and particles discharge out. When you look at the bottom one where there's all these tiny little rings, imagine those rings inside. Each one is the rainbow coming out. And in your body is like those chakra system, which cascades through you. So you are that light. You are projected in that light. You receive that light through all part of your senses and your mind. That's your top crown part, where just like the earth receives all that vital information that feeds it, so do we from our own crown. It just cascades through. But you need to know you're looking straight down the prism of a lens. And that lens is in how your body works.
Well, and I want to add to that, Karen. I want to add to that if we could, because what we're hearing right now in humanity,
the lesson, guys.
What we are hearing right now in humanity is people needing to be able to ground and have that still point and allow that light to come through. And I thought what the next paragraph, what the next section was, Ken, on page 594, when it talks about the great destroyer of unfolding man, it's talking about.
Can we do 593, 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth paragraph down?
Which one does it start with?
Yours because it's kind of given that same concept. Fifth paragraph down, empires are not only being destroyed. There you go.
Empires are not only being destroyed from without, but from within. Graft and corruption are rampant in governments. Dear heavens, this was in the 1950s. An era of unprecedented crime and moral degradation is undermining our country as termites undermine buildings. Nations which were built upon crime are being destroyed by crime, nation by nation, man by man. That which man gave to man is being regiven to him in his own image.
Keep reading.
There is deep decadence in all the arts. Beauty has been replaced by ugliness in painting, music, and sculpture.
Stop there for a second, would you? Can you stop there for a second? How many times do you see a painting, you look at it, you wonder, what does it mean? It's a bunch of blotch of colors. I mean, if you go look at Walter Russell's artwork, and you can bring up some of it, if you can bring up the children that he's painted, James, or any of Walter Russell's artwork, if you really want to see the magnificence of this man's abilities and understand that art that they're talking about is art, is, you know what it is when you see it. You know exactly. You don't have to figure out what's that image. Picasso started that. They called it new age art. And the reality of it is that is decadence of art. It's going backwards to the jungle, because art is art. It will always be art. The might of ages. There's a painting right there. That's beautiful. That's art, right? You don't even have to know what that is to see the artistic values. But now that is a painting. Now that's what they're talking about. And when you go look at a painting, you don't have to wonder what that is. And there's so many layers to what you're looking at. Those are all representation of the most famous people through the history of mankind that built this country, built America, and built civilizations, all the way from the Indians to George Washington, to Joan of Arc, to all the things that the history has brought on, to the modern steamboat, the modern city in the background. Look at the levels that are there. That is art. You don't have to figure it out. The more you look, the more you see. The art that we're talking about is just these blotches of colors and different shapes of bodies and gas masks on things that are supposed to be statues, or it just blows me away that people call that art and you don't even know what it is. You don't even know what it was supposed to represent. until it's explained. So I think that's what they're talking about, the decadence of art and how important it is. Art is simple. It is not complicated. You don't have to figure it out. Go ahead. Who wanted to share on that?
So I wanted to ask Jim if he would share with our listeners here. Jim, how large is that Might of Ages painting? Because seeing it on a screen doesn't do it justice.
I'd say it's about 8 foot wide and about 4 or 5 foot high. It's massive and beautiful. And I've stared at it for hours and hours and hours, and always am blown away by the story. It actually has a soul that it projects. I can say it no other way. It's amazing. It's the soul of humanity projected in one piece of art.
Very good.
So Ken, before we go to break, I do think it's important for us to talk about what's on 594, if you don't mind, because they were bringing this up in the 1950s, and it is more important than ever now. And it talked about, the title right there is what you see on the screen, The Great Destroyer of Unfolding Man. Do you mind if I refer just to
No,
a
I
few
have it
things on this
marked.
page?
You're good. You're perfect.
Okay.
Right on point. Right on point.
The supreme tragedy of this age is not alone in its wars. Wars destroy the best blood of a small percentage of whole peoples. But alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs are destroying an extremely large percentage of men, women, and teenage children of the whole world, who are slaves to the slow mental and physical poisoning by nicotine and other drugs and narcotics. So keep in mind, that was a big deal back then. But I want to go down to the next paragraph because they were ahead of their curve.
Hold on one second there, love, because I really think you're hitting a note here that's so important, is to think about what Leo and Walter were talking about in 1950 with narcotics and tobacco. Now you got fentanyl, you've got these hybrids of everything. There's some other drug mixed with speed now that's taken, they shoot it between their fingers, it takes extremities off, they lose parts of hands. I mean, we are in a huge downfall. If you go through LA, Karen, you want to know a little bit about LA?
I lived in LA. I lived in LA for 25 years.
Okay, great. Under the underpasses in LA, for those that don't live in LA, outside of Karen, people live underneath the freeways. There are tents built of canopies. Almost every underpass you see it. If you go to downtown, you can't go anywhere on the streets without there being a tent or somebody living on the street. There's a reason for it. It's like a system setting it up. This is almost a system mechanism that is flowered into so much of a greater degree and affecting so many more souls. We're now losing our best blood to wars, but we're also losing our best blood to drugs and alcohol, because most alcoholics and drug addicts actually have a higher intelligence above average. That's why they're doing drugs and alcohol, is a sensitivity to life, to the world we live in, that is overwhelming, and it makes them want to escape their feelings. Go ahead, Kim.
So, well, there's some key things on these next 3 pages I'd like to cover, if it's okay, before we go into a break, because I highlighted this is a really big subject. And for any of you that have the home study course, if you have someone fighting any kind of addictions in your life, this could be incredibly powerful. But if we scroll down, it says what drugs are doing to the human race. And so Ken just said that many of them will go to drugs. I want to go to the highlighted sentence. Forgetfulness of body and command of the body by the soul will are the supreme achievements of the mystic and the genius who know the ecstasy of divine light. So Ken was just referring to the fact that all of those things are really an effort of escapism. And so I want to jump down to 595.
And before you go forward with that, love, just because I deal in the world of addiction and so forth, one of the things that these younger generations talk about, especially when you get into musicians, oh, when I smoke weed, it helps me, create better. It is the greatest lie. But that's what addiction does. It makes you believe something that's not true. And it's like what you're reading here is that there might be these moments of coming to something, but they're fleeting and they don't last, and it's not the authentic way to have that spiritual experience. You can take MDMA, you can take acid, all these things now, that psychotropics that affect the brain. But I like what a guy I heard say, and I don't know his name, otherwise I'd give him credit, but he had said, you can have a spiritual experience by hitting yourself on the hammer with the head and you're going to see stars, or you can go into meditation, find the undivided one, and see the stars that way. Which one do you think is the most efficient and productive way? Hitting yourself on the hammer with a head to see stars, or getting quiet, getting meditation? So yes, there is sort of a way to do it, but the effect and what happens as the residue, we talk about residue, it's very severe and not long lasting. They get fleeting moments. It talks about an orator coming up, but go ahead, Kimberly, because we got to get to break.
So I would like to mention a few things on the next 2 pages before we take a break. So if we'll scroll down to the red circle. And so for any of you that are going to send us an email later and be upset with some of the things that are said, please hang tight because there's a reason to it. Okay. So Jim's chuckling. It says people who habitually smoke cannot either forget or rule their bodies. Drug addicts are ruled by their bodies to the exclusion of soul awareness, except at rare intervals when just the right amount of drugs balance their changed normality for a few moments in intervals between the action and the reaction. Now, I want to scroll down to that yellow highlight because, and this goes beyond just smoking, this goes on to the whole weed culture that we have. The important fact is that smoking gradually depolarizes the reasoning. Depolarizes the reasoning, I thought was a really important phrase. It depolarizes the reasoning and thought processes to such an extent that time cycles develop in which the body periodically demands nicotine to stimulate the brain cells, and then the body demands another cigarette. Now, I want to go on though to the next page because it's really more than just nicotine, because it was talking about how at the top of page 596 it says any drug, right there, any drug has a stupefying effect upon the brain cells, which makes clear thinking more difficult. It is a strange fact that when the brain is dulled by drugs, the only cure for it is more drugs, which bring normalcy back for a while, and then more drugs become necessary until the habit is one demanded by the body. And here's what I'd like you to circle for those of you that have your copy. Slavery then follows. So I know Margaret's got a thought here, but if you'll see what I wrote down as I was reading this, that has to do with addiction to food, addiction to sugar, addiction to meds, addiction to alcohol, addictions to cell phones. You're totally right, Bonnie. Addictions to drama. I just had to think about all of the addictions in the world that actually makes our bodies a slave to a drug.
Yes, many people are addicted to their past pain. They wear their trauma on their sleeve like a badge, and then when they represent themselves, they say, I used to be this, or I used to be that, or I'm a recovering this or recovering that. And once you're in recovery, you are in recovery. It's the awareness to realize that slavery then falls, which is very much key. But being a person that works with addiction is realizing that these are a lot of the cause effects, and you got to get the causes and conditions. What's wrong in one's life that's causing them to want more sugar, more of the drugs, more of the things that are unfortunately binding them. And listen, Walter Russell was, Leo had said it, that he probably, I think Margaret said it, that he probably had a few more years left on his life, but he was very much a sweets guy. He liked sugar. So it's not that anybody's talking about being perfect, guys. What we are talking about is the perfect ideals, and the measuring stick is how close are we getting to them or getting away from them. And that's what these are for. These are such a great education process of your own life, of looking at, it doesn't just have to be drugs and nicotine or narcotics. It's anything you're addicted to. There's people that, like Kimberly's saying, addicted to trauma, addicted to arguing. I can't tell you how many people I work with that use their trauma as an identity badge. I used to work with this one gal that her mom was very oppressive and beat her down. And so whenever there was a moment where she did something wrong or something went wrong, it was because, my mom shut me down when I was younger. So I just feel like I need to scream and make an expression because nobody's hearing me. And it's like you're wearing your trauma and unfortunately you use it as an excuse for dysfunctional behavior today from things that happened in the past. That's a big killer. Right? My past will be my future if I keep referencing it. They have to heal from that stuff. Yes, dear.
I know there's a lot more to say about this, and we'll come back after the break. But Margaret, I can see you were dying to saying something about this particular subject.
I think this unit is just so vital because when people get into a downward spiral, a lot of people will blame God. But it's actually man will create his own hell on earth. So, in other words,
Amen.
a person really needs to choose differently. The tragedy is the body becomes a slave. So, in other words, their senses have become a slave to the drugs, the addiction, the sugar, the soda, whatever it is. And but Leah Russell also in her book, God Will Work With You, But Not For You, she has a very important chapter on the basic cause of all disease and illness. And I that is also worth studying as well.
Yeah, one of the things that happens, and I'll say this really quickly, is that people don't realize that what happens is once you realize something's a problem, whether it be drugs, alcohol, food, whatever it might be, and then we make excuses. Oh, I did that because I was bored. I did that because people were telling me and looking at me like I was overweight, so I had to eat something. Pretty soon we start to create these excuses that aren't even real. They're lies about why we do something. And I think that's really important what Margaret's saying and what Kimberly's saying. We have to take responsibility for who we are. At what point in life should a human being take responsibility and accountability for who they are? Maybe 15 years old. I always thought around 15. I could think what I thought. It didn't matter what adults say. I did whatever I wanted to do anyway. So I think about 15, we have to take responsibility for who we are. But how long in our lives do we blame bad behaviors or things that are broken in us from things that happened way long ago? So take responsibility for who you are, own your stuff, and move on. Get past it. Yes, Karen.
I think that the word.
We don't have
Go ahead,
time.
Karen.
No, I think that we started with the whole idea of our senses. Our senses crave the sensation, and that's a word where sensation comes from and satiating comes from. And so the craving and the addictions come, but I think this chapter is asking us to not be a slave to the addictions and to step out and ask for the power to step into the light and actually begin to try to control those senses that are being driven by the computer, which is rewanting and rewired to react and replay its addiction.
Now, this lesson is definitely riddled with a lot about the status of the world and where we're going, and drugs and alcohol. We just got 4 or 5 pages that were about alcohol, nicotine, narcotics. So it's definitely something that Leah and Walter were wanting to address. Yes, Jim.
So I know
But we got to move on. We got to go to break. So can
Well,
we come
it's
back
time
and do
for our
that?
next.
And Kimberly, I'll let you take over.
It's time for our next break, but Jim, I know you have a comment, and then time for our next 3-minute break.
Please don't lightly overlook that word depolarization, because when you're polarizing, you are existing and thriving. When you have thoughts and actions or take things into your body that depolarize you, you're aging and dying.
Good
All right,
point.
say that slower, Jim. That's really important for people who are new. So when you are
When
polarized, you are what?
You are thriving. You are slowly moving through life. But when you have depolarizing thoughts or take depolarizing foods and such and drink into your body, you are rapidly depolarizing and moving fast toward death or illness.
Disintegrate.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm not going to go depolarize during our break, but we'll see everybody in 3 minutes.
Don't forget donations.
And we'll put that up on the screen. All right, 3 minutes goes by very, very quickly. This was a really, really big unit, a really big lesson this time. And Ken, I would love to bring out a couple of points on page 597 if that works for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it talks about, let's just think about, now they were talking about nicotine and alcohol, but we all know, and now on the top of page 597, scroll down, I got right there, go up a little bit. All right, it says habitual users of all these things effectually change the polarity of their bodies. That's what Jim was mentioning, that they more and more effectually shut out the inner voice as they suppress spirit in favor of gratifying the senses. Even genius minds who can be addicted to either of those things in excess is unable to express his genius until the stimulation of the drug allows him to become aware of the light for a short interval, and then it calls loudly to his senses and to which his body is enslaved. And it goes on to talk about how one of the great orators that they knew could not make a speech until he'd given his body a quart of whiskey. The amount of drug changed his normalcy to the point where he could think brilliantly for a little while.
And then
Then came the
go to the very
reaction.
last paragraph on that page and read that.
Okay, then it came the reaction, and the light which shone from him grew dim and then darkened. And then the next paragraph,
The
this,
one at the very
the great,
bottom. If you want to read the second one, go ahead.
For brief moments, he may even look upon the face of God and create inspired art while momentarily free. But those moments ever lessen as the bonds of slavery tighten to tear him from his high throne of the spirit of eternal man to become sensed clay of earth. So I want to go back to that highlighted in yellow right there where you see on the screen. The great spiritual awakening of unfolding man can only come through the awareness of the light in man. So when we think about the addictions that we have in society, do we think it's any accident? I'm asking the panel a question, a rhetorical question. To me, it is no accident that we have addictions of any kind, including addictions to technology, addictions to busyness, addictions on all things with the body, because the more we are addicted, the less inclined we are to be able to live our light. Curious what the panel thinks about that.
We've got a few takers here. Margaret's going first. Okay, I'll go first. Okay, it's just interesting because he talks about in there, in the next couple of pages, the language of light. And the language of light can be, if you're actually seeing that funnel coming through, the computers are made with bits, zeros and ones. It's all there is. It's just you and the source. So when you think of it that way, you can look at it that way. Another way of looking at it is the Morse code. The light goes on, the light goes off. So God speaks to you in the language of light. We don't think of it that way, but within that lens that comes to us, there's nothing but bits and particles that get arranged and show us images. But those are the language of light, and those images that come to your head or the voices that come to your head that give you that inspiration. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Love that. Margaret?
I'm confused about that, but go ahead.
That made a lot of sense to me. Margaret?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
You're on mute, Margaret. Margaret's saying something profound and she's on mute. We want to be sure to catch it.
You know, you can liken it to a flywheel that's off balance. You know, when someone's addicted to nicotine or alcohol, the flywheel, if it's moving slowly, you can manage it, right? But then you need more and more cigarettes, you're a chain smoker, or you need a quart of whiskey, you know, every hour, and then it breaks apart.
Yep.
In other words, you have to have more and more and more to try and rebalance the I guess the sin, you could say.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the mistake. You're trying to rebalance the mistake, but it's a flywheel that ultimately flies apart.
Nice.
That's why you have to ultimately find your balance again. And it's very, very hard once you've created a body that has an addiction.
Yeah, you know, a lot of people are doing this thing called ayahuasca that was popular, you know, about 5-10 years ago. And I think Oprah Winfrey and people got into it of trying to think that you're going to find some spiritual awakening by drinking some ancient root from, you know, from Brazil, which is, again, you know, it's, I think Bonzel says it best. There is no physical act, physical position, or physical thing you can do to get to that one still light. It's not about effect, right? The energy is not in matter. The energy is in idea. That's where the power of everything is at. It's in the idea of that thing. That's what we're trying to learn this lesson, is learn to become people that live in the idea. The idea that I don't have to be bondage to my body anymore, that I can live through that one still light of God's mind that centers me, centers every atom within us. It's our birthright. We have a right. And I always remember when I first started this journey, think about it. God knows everything that you are capable of and not capable of. All God in this message will ever ask from you is your best. Nobody's perfect. So if you have an issue, I am an addiction expert, so I deal in this all the time. And I've been sober for 33 years, so I've walked through many years of recovery and seen this disease for what it is. And it is devastating when someone becomes addicted and hooked and their life unravels. And just like Margaret said, it becomes that wheel where they need more and more and more, and they get less and less and less until that whole thing just falls apart. But, you know, again, what we're talking about is the undivided, guys, is not divided. There is no dimension in an undivided idea. The dimension only exists in duality. That's so important for me to understand. Remember, and duality means compression, expansion. So everything that happens, unhappens at the same moment. So that's what it means. It's just a mirrored universe of effect. That's what we exist in, but the cause of it all is singular. The cause of it all is all the idea of creation. That's what we're trying to delve more into, expound more on, and realize we are creators. And what we're creating here is a community that's carrying a message to talk about the light that centers every human being, that we are all of genius. We are inherent of genius. We have that right to be genius. This is about being better, not about being perfect. So don't get too confused. And we all have hurdles and go through those things, but there are solutions all the time is what we're hearing. If you're feeling out of balance, we can get you back to balance. There's ways to get back, but you have to reach out for help and get honest with someone and talk with someone about it that's gone through that. That's the important thing. So if you're having issues, find someone that maybe has walked through those issues that can help you walk through them. Yes, dear.
I want to bring up two things in just a moment, but Margaret, I know you have a thought first.
Well, Deborah in the chat has a very good insight. She says the majority of people have defined their imbalance as normal, so they have no idea that they are out of balance. And actually, you know, Leah Russell does say that when you create an imbalance like nicotine, it becomes a part of your seed and it repeats. In other words, when you've sinned, you know, I say sinned, if you've made that kind of mistake, it is part of your soul seed and it can repeat. So that's why it's good to get it right now, you know, correct yourself now and don't suffer through several lifetimes with that imbalance.
Yes.
Well, there were, so for me, as I mentioned to the group before, I lost 100 pounds 18 years ago. So of course, my addiction was food. So it wasn't in all the other traditional addictions. And I still have to be very, very careful with sugar. In fact, I can hear very clearly from the creator and from the divine, but when I take sugar, I literally can feel the aperture closing. The light it shrinks. So, and I can almost hear them every once in a while say something like, you really need that, like you need a hole in the head. So the universe has a sense of humor. Okay. So, but I can feel it actually shrinking the light. But I wanted to bring up something on page 599 that ties into what we're saying. And then I want to bring up something about a mirror on a slide. 599 says this in that top bracketed, if you'll go on down, James, it says, you must know your universe, for your body, which you are building, is one unit of it. You must know how to control it. You also must know it for what it is instead of what you think it is. When you become familiar with it as being but certain states of motion, you must know that those states of motion are wave records of your desires, just as a picture is the record of your painter's desire. And that's what you're talking about there, is Margaret, is being very mindful of the wave patterns, kind of like the tree rings that we're putting into place on slide 14, right?
Mm-hmm. And then,
It
can you
actually
go
goes
down to the next paragraph on 599 there, the medical profession? I think that really adds to what you just said.
well, the next two paragraphs are powerful. So, I mean, just take a look here.
Go ahead,
A
read them both.
manufacturer produces a better product in the measure of its knowledge of the product. Your body is as much your product as the products of a factory. Millions of years of your desire produced it. In 1 minute, the desire of your will can alter its entire structural balance in either direction, towards life or death, without the slightest physical action on your part. The medical profession can make enormous strides in its great service to man by starting upon the basis of greater knowledge of cause of the countless effects in its encounters. In its search for cause of effects in matter, its beginning should be in the greater knowledge of motion, which matter is, and the relation of mind to motion, which controls body structure. So, I want to pause for us all here because this is part of our passion for doing this Awaken show, make this very, very real. And to me, I wanted to ask James to bring up slide 12 right quick, because Ken and I were talking about this after our last session together. And this was from the Grand Tetons. I hiked 3 miles in, back when I had a bum knee. And this was actually a picture that I just took from my Apple iPhone. This is how pristine and how beautiful. But notice how the top of it was what the real mountain was, and the bottom of it was the reflection in the lake. So notice how powerful, because the next slide, what I did is I turned it around. And so if you'll see, on the left-hand side is the real image, and on the right-hand side, I flipped it.
Wow.
But
Inverted.
notice, I inverted it, and notice how the reflection of what we see is the same. I mean, that's what struck me about being in this very pristine moment in the Grand Tetons in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And so if we think about this in our life, when we are a slave to our senses, what we do is we distort the reflection. Is that a fair way to say it, Margaret?
Yeah, I think
That's an excellent metaphor, definitely. That's perfect.
it also creates the illusion of life. And that's what I think we were talking about is when you look at that, it's the same as everything is a reflection of itself. You are a reflection of the inside as you are a reflection of the outside. And so it's a mirrored universe. That's the point of what we're living in. That's why it is all just light waves reflecting in mirrors, which is exactly what you see in this picture. So, which one's real and which one's not real. If you're and thus you can see how a picture represents this is dimensionless universe. There's no depth in the picture. We think there's depth in things, but there isn't. If there was, those mountains would never fit in that little lens that's in that camera that transmits it into an image, a picture that we're seeing. So again, which side is the mirror, which side is real? And the reality of it is the world we live in, it's all mirrors. It's all smoke and mirrors. The light is the transmitter. Light corpuscle and light waves are the communicators, but that is light. Those mountains are light, the water's light, the sky is light, and the top and the bottom are just the same because we live in a mirrored universe. It's just a great example of how this universe is just a universe of mirrors.
And when we think about Walter Russell's passion for nature, this is part of what's always appealed to me about the work of the Russells. When I was there after hiking 3 miles and trying to make sure I didn't get eaten by bears and all this other stuff, right? The stillness of the moment that I had, that I literally could not tell the difference between what was real and the reflection in the water. It was so pure. There were no people that were splashing around. There was no sound. It was absolute perfection.
Beautiful.
All right.
So
I
what
know
are we
we're
doing,
inching
love? It's
towards Ken. Where do
5:28,
you want to take us?
5:29 now, right? What was that, 26? Oh my God, we got 5 minutes. Okay, we got 5 minutes. My eyes, guys, sorry, man. That's part of the aging process. The body's, the senses of these eyes are diminishing.
I think if you go to 601, it kind of, I think the one who spoke to this clearly was Jim, and it talks about the growing, decaying, the living, and the dying, the compressing. And so, I mean, if I'm looking at this and getting it through here, there we go. Undivided light, the soul idea, which extends to the culture, intelligent expression of art, I think is so key because it actually depicts what any given society is doing at any given time, whether it's decaying or whether it's expanding, whether we have a Renaissance approach or whether we have the true arts and a Renaissance man, or whether we have people being caught in their senses. I think if we were just to get through that part pretty quickly, because we got minutes.
Yeah,
Well,
I think it's so important, like you said, Karen, there's representing the illusion, right? As bodies are living, they're dying, and as they're dying, they're living. And we just saw the mirrored effect of that image that Kimberly just brought up, either growing or decaying, generating or degenerating. As they're happening, they're unhappening. And as you read below that, it says no matter which pair of words we use, they would all have the same meaning. Those words they're using are called duality. It's an illusion. Everything that's happening is unhappening. As you're growing, you're decaying. As you're decaying, you're growing. And right, it's mirrored. You got to, just like the picture you just saw, you can switch those words around. So, right, instead of degenerating, generating, you could go, I'm degenerating and generating instead of generating, degenerating, because that's what we talk about the formula. Everything that happens is recorded. As it's recorded, it's reversed and played back in eternal repetitions, which is a hard formula to understand. So every action, there's a reaction equal and proportionate to the action. It's voided as it happens, and as it's voided, it's recorded, and then it's played back inverse, like that picture you just saw that Kimberly just brought up. And no matter which two words they use, it's all going to have the same meaning. It's how simple this is. The world of effect is not complicated like we make it. It really is simple.
Yes. I do like. Okay, Kimberly's got a thought before.
Well, go ahead, Karen, and then I want to jump down to the bottom of 604 because I think this next page is important.
Well, the other part, life is but a desire for motion. That's how we create. That's how we bring our things forward into this reality.
And the desire is really love. In other words, what you'll find is when you are really motivated to do something, it's usually for service to another person. It's generally not necessarily for service to yourself. You're more motivated to do it for someone else. And
That's
so
true.
and that's because love is the motivating force.
Yes.
So two things I wanted to bring up, when we're talking about finding the still point, we've just gotten over a historical TikTok ban here in the US, and it only lasted less than 24 hours. It's already back up. I almost wish it had gone on longer. We were not able to go live tonight on TikTok because of it. They're still working through the kinks, but there were people that were reacting about they didn't know what to quite do with their life now if TikTok actually went away. So I had to wonder if they would go back to the stereo still point, Jim, if that was possible. But I do think it's important when we study these things. This was something that I struggled with a bit because at the bottom of page 604, it says, we are all of us actors in the divine drama of creation. And if its actors did not express emotions which are appropriate to the lines of the play, all right, scroll down, James, they would be useless and purposeless actors. Okay, so scroll down, keep going, James. Next page.
What page are we on?
We're on the top of page 605. So, okay. So in highlighted, it says, so grief, suffering, loneliness, and kindred emotions are as purposeful in the divine drama of life as joyfulness, happiness, and like emotions are purposeful. And being purposeful, they are good. Because scrolling down, this is important because it was something that I struggled with. If I go to the red circle, James, it says to have so much knowledge of the undivided universe that it leaves you cold to the emotions of the divided universe is to hold yourself aloof from the play and renders you purposeless. So I wanted to pause here for a moment because for me, when I learned that I was living in an illusion, I went through a period of time that I was like, what's the point? Why am I even trying? I mean, because you're talking to, like I'd mentioned to you, that this was, I was very late to any kind of awakening to all of this. And so when we're learning these things, it's not for us to opt out of this lovely divided life that we're living, because that's in effect part of the divine drama of creation. Is it not, Margaret?
Yes, exactly. And And also, people need to remember that the undivided is always there. In other words, love, or the motivating force, the absolute stillness, is all pervasive. It's always there. So even though it's a drama of creation, it's so purposeful and it's all good. Now, if man creates misery for himself, there's a lesson there. The misery is to teach him a lesson, so he'll pull back and he'll start doing the right thing. So once you know God's ways and processes, you can guide your life by it. But it is up to man to discover those ways and processes. Don't expect God to live your life. Don't expect God to give you all these gifts. You have to discover God and live within his ways to create a beautiful life.
I think we should read that next paragraph too. Margaret, you want to read that? The greatest achievement? Or Jim? Or
Yeah. The greatest achievement of life is to learn how to take all things alike, but it does not mean one should become an intellectual stoic. God's body expresses all of the emotions and passions which result from the division of gravity pressures into two opposite conditions.
Hold on there, Margaret. What is God's body?
Yes, so that's the compression expansive pump.
But isn't
And
God's
that's,
body creation itself? That's God's
yes,
body is
it is.
creation?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when we talk about God's body, it's just like yours is my body. Your body is your creation, and the creation we live in is God's body. So therefore God has a body. But just like you can see your body, but I don't know what's going on in your left arm or right arm, but I can see your body. God has a body, and we call it creation. Go ahead, Margaret.
Right. All of them manifest God's thinking, and they always balance. Storms subside, and the calm after the storm demonstrates that both are equally good. The calm is lovelier after the storm, just as the water is sweeter after the long drought.
Beautiful.
Well, and Ken, on this next page, I do think as we wrap up here, if you will read that highlighted sentence, and then I'll talk about the circle, because you say that highlighted sentence to me all the time.
Oh, I do say that. I say that to everybody. Your capacity for joy and happiness may be measured by your capacity for grief and suffering. All the knowledge in the world should not dehumanize you. And I just love that because I have had a life full of a lot of suffering and grieving, but I had to learn how to grieve. When I was younger and had those things happen in my life, I had a rough childhood, but I never grieved them. And let me tell you, that stuff never goes away. So you're going to either deal with it when it happens or you're going to deal with it at some point in life because it's going to come out and manifest itself, which helped me to understand it's important that being sad and remember, if you have a physical ailment, you need to take a physical action to restore balance. If you have a mental ailment and you're depressed, you need to take a mental action, which is talking to God, talking to love, coming from love. It doesn't mean that we love every single thing that we do, but it does mean that we can put love into everything we do. Right. So it's not just about thinking, oh, I love doing this, because that's not what it's about. But I can always put love into what I do. So in terms of that, for me, it was so important to understand that, because if you've had a rough life, that means, and you've gone through hard times, that means joy and happiness is there for you. It's your birthright. You've earned it. You've earned that joy and happiness. So some people stay in bad and sadness and grief, and they don't think they're ever going to get out, which is what it's telling us. Yes, the storm will subside. The calm will come. The water will be sweeter after the drought. And so everything you're going through is saying to take all things alike. It's part of the story. To me, I'll wrap up on this. The best way to do this is life is a story, right? It's a book. And it has many chapters in it. And some of them chapters are really good, and some of them chapters don't feel so good, but they make up the whole story. It's sort of like if you didn't have darkness in shadows in a painting are just as important as colors in that painting behind my love right there. The shadows in that mane are just as important, in that chest are just as important as the color on the nose and on the forehead. They equally balance themselves. So it's again about that balancing mechanism. The shadows are just as important as the colors in life.
Well, and I think as we're wrapping up here, that next paragraph that I have circled and highlighted in yellow, this is what we'd like everyone to take away. And it says this: knowledge of universal law will give you the courage to transform the greatest defeat, whichever threatens you, into your greatest achievement. Think of the beauty of that. It will
Yeah,
give
that's
you a
beautiful.
philosophy by means of which you may meet the grief of death, enriched by the knowledge that every experience is good, and that every experience strengthens you to meet all experiences alike.
What a poignant
So,
paragraph, Mr. Porter, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's like God said, here, I'm gonna read this just for Jim, man. I'm gonna bring this out just for Jim. Here you go, man. There's your deck of cards you get to play with now. Boy, that's powerful. That's so powerful. It's a big story, man. And Jim and I were talking earlier today, and that's what Jim was talking about. It's like, life is a huge story, and events happen, and we have to. It's important that we walk through every phase of them, no matter whether it's not about good or bad. It's about trying to maintain character as you do it, right? Trying to maintain that state of love. That's how we take all things alike, good and bad. It always balances out. There will never be an imbalance in God's universe. You can do nothing to upset the balance of God's universe. No human being, no man, no civilization could ever do anything to upset the balance of God's universe. Go ahead, love.
on the bottom of page 608 is a quote that I thought would be helpful for us to end with before we show Karen's visual journey. So last week, thank you so much for those of you that saw the video already. We're going to show it again tonight, but it says this. It says, do you doubt your power? Give of what you have, and you will discover that all the power of the universe is yours to give. It is at the moment of your first giving that you discover your omnipotence. You have searched and you have found. Countless millions are also searching, but have not yet found the path to the kingdom. A new dawn of unfolding man is breaking. And Ken, I thought that was incredible, an incredible ending here. And Karen has gifted us once again with a visual journey, and we'd like to encourage everybody to stay on, enjoy the visual journey, ask some questions as we come back to this. And remember, the visual journeys are all available on our YouTube channel so that you can watch it and pause it to read every lovely word. Those of you that want things to go slower, but we're always mindful of time. And Karen, you pulled this together specifically for Unit 8, correct?
Oh, it's for this chapter. This was a big one.
All right, wonderful. Why don't
also,
we go
guys,
ahead and
we can put up that donation thing again. It's really become important. Again, there's a cost to this that's been absorbed, and it's just we have to be self-supporting through our own contributions. It's so important that we, as a community, and everybody that's listening is a part of this community, support, and we do our part. By listening, you're a major part. It's like they break down a watch, right? And they tell you what gear is the most important part of a watch. You couldn't say that. It's just the watch tells time. Everybody counts and everybody matters.
All right, so let's enjoy that visual journey, Miss Karen. A gracious thank you once again.
You're welcome.
there was some chatter in our private chat box about how it's the video for lesson 29, and this was tonight was lesson 30. But James, I have to tell you, I think you did that on purpose just to help cement our learnings. Did you not? You're on mute.
Yes, we'll go with that.
James.
We'll go with that I did it on purpose. Yeah. So I loaded, as much as that was a good thing to rewatch, I loaded the lesson 29. So lesson 30 is on YouTube. And if you go to where I think it says enter session, and then I'm uploading another full version of it. So you can go right to lesson 30 if you want to watch that.
Wonderful. Well, a gracious thank you to Karen. To be honest with you, I actually, when you look at how much we're covering in Unit 8, that's really huge. I mean, the 29 was a big unit, a big lesson. Tonight was a big lesson. And Jim, next week we're going into lesson 31. And Ken, you've been helping to facilitate us. Unit 8 is pretty pivotal. So what do you want to say for us as we wrap up our time together here?
You know, I think it's really important to talk about God. We don't hear that name very much. I'm not hearing it as much as I'd like to, because that's what this is about. It's about recognizing that we are all centered by the light of God, all presence, all knowing, and all power. So that's omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent. The three omnis, I call it. We're all centered by them. And to me, I've learned to get to them in those stages. But remember, if it's the great cosmic play, right? Why did God do this? How are we all one? We're all one because we're all centered by the same exact amount of presence, the same exact amount of knowledge, and the same exact amount of power. Nobody was given a thimbleful of God and then somebody else given a bucket full. We all have the same amount. So God is so important. We say love, we say all these off words, but to me, it's about a relationship, a living relationship that I have with God right now, right here, because I can only have it in the now. So where you've been doesn't matter. Where you're at right now is all that counts. That's what you're hearing. It's always about the now. Me, I found I can only be with God in the now. So the now is where that living relationship exists, which allows me to play that piano in the background, which I really love music, which I never thought I was musically inclined until I came into this message and realized I love the piano so much I must be able to play. There's too much love there. And by God, when I sat down at 38 years old just to play the piano, I just started playing. I listened to so much piano, I just started playing. That's the same way Walter Russell talked about the way that he lived. At 59 years old, almost 60 years old, he switched from painting to sculpting. Can you imagine that? At 59, 60 years old back then, there was no testosterone. There was no life, HGH or hormones to keep you happy and healthy. You just had that vibrancy or you didn't. That guy switched modality at 60 years old, man. I got to tell you, it's an example, and that's exactly what he represents. What I do, you can do, and that much more, which is exactly that guy 2,000 years ago said the same thing, Christ, that the works that I do are nothing, so the works that ye shall do. Because we're going to do them from not knowing. We have to learn to know. Christ consciousness is to know. It just is, right? It sits there in each and every one of us, awaiting its opening. All you got to do is desire, and it will stand before you. Desire to be one with God, and you will become one with God. Remembering, I guess I only desire it in the moment I'm in. What I desired earlier this morning isn't going to carry me through tonight. I got to still have that desire as I unfold through the day and all through the night. That's what I think is so important. Yes,
Can I just finish with one little quote here from Leo?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, she's talking about finding love. It says, you never find out that you have it until you desire to give it. You then discover that you have it to give. From the moment of that discovery, you find happiness and love in the measure of your giving. I love that.
Yeah, and sometimes then I'm sure that everybody can relate to it. You feel like we give and give, we give and give, and we're not re-given, which is just not the truth. That's what you just read. It always will become good. Everything will always be converted into something good. That's the beauty of what we're talking about. Great.
So here we are at the end of our time together. Gracious, thank you for everyone staying with us as long as you have. Any final thoughts, Jim?
No, I was very inspired by this whole lesson, and it became a living lesson once we got on there and discussed it. I love it.
I would totally agree with you. So a gracious thank you to all of our folks that were with us tonight. Look forward to having you continue the journey with us. Next week, we'll be working on lesson 31. So be sure to check out any of the videos. We're doing all we can to just help spread the light as you are as well. So a gracious thank you to us all, to everyone who is on this journey with us. Sure to get your copy of the home study course, and we won't say goodbye. We will say until next Sunday.